Imagine, if you will, the gentle caress of an ancient breeze, carrying whispers from forgotten stone, as we begin our journey into the very heart of human ingenuity. Our story tonight, a soothing tapestry woven from history and wonder, is titled The Golden Ratio's Secret: How Ancient Greek Architecture Still Shapes Our World. Let your mind drift as we embark upon the first chapter of this timeless tale, the cradle of columns, from Mycenaean might to early temples. Close your eyes and imagine the sun-drenched landscapes of ancient Greece, long before the Parthenon stood majestically on the Athenian Acropolis, long before philosophers walked through stoas, deep in thought. We travel back to a time when the very first stirrings of what we now call architecture began to shape the land, a time of rugged power and nascent dreams. Our journey begins not with the graceful columns you might instantly recall, but with the raw, formidable strength of the Mycenaean civilization. Imagine the Argolid plain, shimmering under the distant haze of a warm sun. Here, perched atop strategic hills, rise cities not of elegant marble, but of colossal, unhewn stones. This is the world of Mycenae, Tyrans, and Pylos, where the very earth seems to have birthed their formidable fortresses. Feel the weighty silence that descends as you approach these ancient citadels. The walls, known to later Greeks as Cyclopean masonry, were said to be built by the mythical one-eyed giants themselves. So immense were the boulders. Picture them now. Massive, irregular blocks, sometimes weighing many tons, meticulously fitted together without mortar, their sheer weight providing an almost unbreakable defense. You can almost feel the cool, rough texture of these stones beneath your fingertips, sensing the immense effort and collective will that went into their placement. These walls, rising perhaps 15 feet thick, 40 or 50 feet high, were not merely barriers. They were statements of power, expressions of a people living in an age of tribal conflict and burgeoning kingdoms. They speak of security, of protection, of the very fundamental human need to create shelter and defend one's community. Within these impregnable walls, a different kind of architecture began to emerge, one that would lay the very groundwork for all that was to follow. At the heart of each Mycenaean palace lay the megaron. Imagine stepping across a threshold, feeling the shift from the bright, outdoor light to the shadowy coolness within. The megaron was not just a room. It was the central hall, the spiritual and administrative core of the palace. Picture a large, rectangular chamber, its roof supported by 4 sturdy wooden columns, arranged around a central circular hearth. Smoke would have spiraled upwards, escaping through an opening in the roof, carrying with it the sense of wood smoke and ancient meals. This simple, yet profound, arrangement of central space, defined by a hearth and supported by columns, was an architectural seed, a primal form that resonated with human gathering and communal life. The columns, in their earliest form, were practical wooden supports, perhaps unadorned, but even then, they began to define space, to create rhythm, to hint at the ordered beauty that would one day blossom from their very essence. The golden ratio, a concept of divine proportion, was still centuries from being articulated, yet in these simple arrangements, in the very human desire for balance and order, its earliest whispers could almost be heard. The need to enclose space efficiently, to create a hierarchy of areas, to arrange elements in a way that felt right. These instincts were taking root. Beyond the palaces, the Mycenaeans also developed monumental tombs, known as tholos tombs or beehive tombs. Imagine entering one of these structures, feeling the cool, damp air on your skin. These were marvels of early engineering, circular chambers built into hillsides, with corbelled domes rising majestically above. Each stone course projects slightly inward from the one below it, until the dome closes at the top. The most famous, the Treasury of Atreus, inspires awe even today with its massive lintel stone, weighing over 100 tons, spanning the doorway. To stand beneath it, to feel the immense weight of the earth above you, supported by human ingenuity, is to touch a profound sense of ancient power and reverence for the dead. These structures, too, showcased a nascent understanding of monumental scale and sophisticated stonework, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible with the materials at hand. They were not just tombs. They were statements, enduring memorials etched into the very landscape, a testament to a society's belief in the permanence of their leaders and their legacy. Then, a period of obscurity descended upon Greece, often referred to as the Dark Ages, when the light of recorded history began to pierce through again. Around the 8th century BCE, a new culture was stirring, one that would fundamentally redefine architecture. The raw power of the Mycenaeans gave way to a more refined, more philosophical approach to building. This was the archaic period, a time of discovery and experimentation, where the foundations of classical Greek architecture were truly laid. Imagine the landscape shifting now, from the formidable fortresses to nascent sanctuaries. As Greek city-states began to form, so too did the need for communal worship and the housing of their deities. The earliest temples were humble, perhaps built of mud brick and timber, simple rectangular structures with roofs supported by rows of wooden posts. You can almost smell the earth and wood, feel the rough texture of the sun-baked bricks. These were sacred spaces, yes, but they were also direct descendants of the Mycenaean megaron, adapting its basic form for religious purposes. The central hearth gave way to an altar, and the columns, once purely functional, began their slow, deliberate evolution towards sculptural beauty. It was during this period that stone began to replace wood and mud brick as the primary building material for temples, a monumental shift that allowed for greater permanence and scale. Imagine the sound of chisels against stone, a rhythmic chipping echoing across the landscape as artisans learned to shape this new, challenging medium. As the wooden posts transformed into stone columns, the foundational elements of the Greek architectural orders began to solidify. The Doric order was the first to emerge, strong and austere, reflecting the robust character of the early city-states. Picture these early Doric columns, stout, fluted shafts rising directly from the stylobate, the temple's platform, without a base. Feel the sense of solid grounding they convey. Their capitals, the topmost part, were simple, unadorned cushions, supporting a square abacus block. Above this, the entablature, composed of a plain architrave and a frieze adorned with alternating triglyphs and metopes, began to take shape. The triglyphs, deeply grooved, are thought to be stone interpretations of the ends of the wooden beams from earlier timber temples. A beautiful example of how new materials often echo the forms of old. The metopes, the spaces between the triglyphs, would eventually become canvases for sculptural narrative, but in these early days, they were simpler, less adorned. These early Doric temples, such as the Temple of Apollo at Corinth or the Temple of Hera at Olympia, were experiments in proportion and form. They were often longer and narrower than their later counterparts, their columns sometimes squat and widely spaced. Yet in their very simplicity, there was a profound elegance. They weren't striving for the mathematical precision that would later define the Parthenon. But they were searching for a balance, a visual harmony. The builders, perhaps intuitively, were beginning to understand how different elements related to each other, how the height of a column should relate to its diameter, or how the spacing of columns could create a sense of order and rhythm. This was the birth of the Greek pursuit of ideal forms, the very intellectual bedrock upon which the later secrets of the golden ratio would be discovered and applied. Consider the meticulous process involved: quarrying massive blocks of stone, transporting them across challenging terrain, shaping them with bronze tools, and lifting them into place. These were feats of immense organization and collective labor. Imagine the creaking of wooden rollers, the groans of straining oxen, the shouts of hundreds of workers, all dedicated to a shared vision. Every fluted column shaft, every precisely cut block, represented countless hours of human effort and a growing mastery over material. The early temples began to adopt the peripteral plana rectangular cella, enclosed by a colonnade on all four sides. Imagine walking around one of these emerging structures, the sunlight playing across the fluted surfaces of the columns, the shadows shifting with the sun's slow arc. This encircling colonnade or peristyle created a sacred ambulatory, a path for procession and worship, blurring the line between the inner sacred space and the outer world. It was a conscious decision to make the building beautiful from all angles, a rejection of a single dominant facade, and a move towards a holistic architectural experience. This embrace of completeness, of a harmonious unity of parts, was a quintessential Greek ideal, one that would find its ultimate expression in the golden ratio. In this foundational period, the Greeks were not just building structures, they were building a visual language. They were transforming raw materials into expressions of their nascent philosophical and religious beliefs. The column, once a simple support, was becoming a symbol of strength, of order, of a rising civilization's ambition. The temple, once a humble dwelling, was evolving into a sublime statement of human aspiration, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. The seeds of perfection were being sown, and the groundwork was being laid for the intricate dance between logic and beauty that would define the Hellenic world. The echoes of these early efforts resonate still, a silent testament to the ingenuity of those who first dared to shape stone into enduring form. Perfection in stone, the classical orders and the Parthenon's genius. Imagine the crisp, clear light of an Athenian morning, illuminating the sacred rock of the Acropolis. The raw strength of the Mycenaean walls has receded into distant memory, and the tentative steps of the archaic period have matured into a confident stride. We are now in the high classical period, a golden age where philosophy, democracy, and art converge to create an unparalleled cultural flourishing. It was during this luminous era that the principles of proportion, balance, and harmony, the very essence of the golden ratio spirit, were refined into an art form, culminating in structures that felt, and still feel, divinely inspired. Recall the simple, sturdy Doric columns we encountered earlier, born from the sturdy timber of nascent temples. Now, imagine them perfected. The Doric order, the oldest and most robust, achieved its peak of refinement. Picture its fluted shaft, no longer squat, but gracefully tapering upwards, subtly swelling in the middle with a gentle curve known as antisis. This almost imperceptible bulge, too subtle for the eye to consciously register, but profoundly effective, was a brilliant optical refinement designed to counteract the illusion of concavity that a perfectly straight column would present. It imbued the column with a sense of organic life, as if it were subtly bulging under the weight it carried, giving it a vibrant, muscular presence. Feel the imagined cool marble, smooth beneath your fingertips, the rhythm of the sharp vertical flutes drawing your gaze upwards. The capital, the transition from column to entablature, became more refined. The echinus, the cushion-like element, flowed with a more graceful curve, supporting a perfectly square abacus. Above the Doric frieze, with its rhythmic alternation of triglyphs and metopes, was no longer just a structural element, but a narrative canvas. Imagine sculptures adorning the metopes, depicting scenes of mythological battles, their dynamic forms frozen in marble, telling stories of gods and heroes, of order triumphing over chaos. The entire entablature, the horizontal band above the columns, achieved a precise balance, its weight appearing perfectly supported, its forms expressing a profound sense of solidity and unflinching strength. The Parthenon, soon to be unveiled, would stand as the supreme testament to the perfected Doric order, a monument to the power of reasoned design. But the classical Greeks were not content with just one voice in stone. From the eastern regions of Greece, particularly the Ionian Islands and Asia Minor, emerged a second, more elegant and ornate order, the Ionic. Imagine a different kind of column now, one that feels lighter, more graceful, almost feminine in its delicate beauty. The Ionic column stands on a molded base, lifting its slender shaft delicately from the stylobate. Its flutes are deeper and more numerous than the Doric, creating a richer play of light and shadow along its surface. But the true hallmark of the Ionic order, its most enchanting feature, is its capital. Picture it now, a graceful cushion adorned with two elegant volutes, spirals that unfurl like the curling tendrils of a nautilus shell or the ram's horns. These volutes, exquisitely carved, evoke a sense of organic growth and gentle movement. Above the capital, the Ionic frieze is continuous, a smooth band often adorned with continuous narrative sculpture, rather than the segmented metopes of the Doric. Imagine a long procession carved into the stone, figures flowing gracefully, their drapery rippling, creating a sense of an unfolding story. The temple of Athena Nike on the Acropolis, though smaller than the Parthenon, embodies the exquisite refinement of the Ionic style, with its delicate proportions and intricate details. It speaks of a different kind of beauty, one that is more ornate, perhaps more emotional, yet still rigorously governed by principles of proportion. And then, later in the classical period, a third, even more lavish order made its appearance, originating from the city of Corinth, the Corinthian. Imagine a capital that seems to burst forth with natural vitality, a riot of sculpted foliage. The Corinthian capital is instantly recognizable by its elaborate decoration, typically carved with stylized acanthus leaves that unfurl upwards, often culminating in delicate tendrils and rosettes. Picture these leaves, their edges sharp and crisp, their surfaces layered, creating a deep, intricate shadow play. This order, while less frequently used in exterior temple design during the classical period itself, hinted at a growing desire for greater visual complexity and decorative richness. Its slender proportions and highly ornate capital gave it a luxurious, almost regal appearance, suggesting a departure from the austere purity of the Doric and the refined elegance of the Ionic towards a celebration of sculptural abundance. Now, let us turn our gaze to the undisputed masterpiece of this era, the very embodiment of perfection in stone, the Parthenon. Imagine standing before it on the Athenian Acropolis, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. It is not merely a temple. It is a monumental philosophical statement. Built between 447 and 432 BCE, under the supervision of the statesman Pericles, designed by the architects Itinos and Callicrates, with the sculptural program overseen by the master sculptor Phidias. A Parthenon, dedicated to the goddess Athena Parthenis, patroness of Athens, is a Doric temple, yet it incorporates subtle Ionic elements, a testament to Athenian confidence and ambition. Its very existence was a celebration of Athenian democracy, its triumph over the Persians, and its leading role in the Greek world. The genius of the Parthenon lies not just in its colossal scale, or the exquisite craftsmanship of its marble, but in its incredibly subtle and sophisticated optical refinements. Imagine trying to build a perfectly straight structure of such immense size. The human eye, when viewing such a building from a distance or from certain angles, would perceive optical illusions. Long horizontal lines would appear to sag in the middle, and parallel vertical lines would seem to converge. The architects of the Parthenon were acutely aware of these optical quirks, and they engineered a series of brilliant, almost imperceptible adjustments to counteract them, making the temple appear visually perfect to the human eye. Picture the stylobate, the very platform on which the temple rests. It is not perfectly flat. Instead, it curves upwards slightly towards the center, by a mere 69 millimeters at the ends of the long sides and 33 millimeters at the ends of the short sides. Imagine this subtle rise, barely detectable, yet essential. This curvature prevents the long horizontal lines from appearing to sag. This gentle swelling also extends to the entablature above, creating a harmonious unity throughout the structure. Now, turn your attention to the columns. We spoke of entasis, a subtle bulge in their shafts, but their refinements go further. Imagine looking up at the corners of the temple. The corner columns, rather than being perfectly vertical, are actually tilted inward slightly, almost imperceptibly, by about 6 centimeters over their height. This inward lean or inward inclination, along with a slight thickening of the corner columns, serves to counteract the effect of strong light appearing to erode their edges, making them seem visually more robust and preventing the corners from appearing to splay outwards. Every single column on the Parthenon, 46 in total, is subtly different, adjusted based on its position, its relation to light, and its perceived load. Imagine the meticulous calculations, the precise carving required to achieve this symphony of subtle adjustments, all without the aid of modern instruments. Even the spacing of the columns, the intercolumniation, is not uniform. The corner columns are placed slightly closer to their neighbors than the central columns. This seemingly minor adjustment prevents the corners from appearing weak or stretched out due to the increased light surrounding them. The effect of these countless minute deviations from perfect mathematical regularity is that the Parthenon, for all its colossal size and monumental materials, appears light, vibrant, and alive. It possesses a dynamic harmony, a visual perfection that transcends mere geometry. This pursuit of visual perfection, of forms that felt right, even if they deviated from strict Euclidean geometry, aligns profoundly with the principles of the golden ratio. While direct evidence of its conscious application in the Parthenon's dimensions is a subject of scholarly debate and remains unproven as a rigid design rule, the spirit of the golden ratio, the pursuit of an aesthetically pleasing proportion, with a ratio of the smaller part to the larger part, is the same as the ratio of the larger part to the whole, permeated Greek thought. The Parthenon embodies this pursuit through its meticulous attention to proportion, balance, and the harmonious relationship of its parts. Every element, from the width of a column to the height of the entablature, seems to exist in perfect relation to every other, creating a sense of inherent rightness and universal beauty. It represents an ideal, a quest for cosmic order translated into stone. Inside the Parthenon, though much is lost to time, imagine the awe-inspiring chryselephantine statue of Athena Parthenis, some 12 meters tall, sculpted by Phidias himself. The temple was not merely an architectural shell. It was the sacred dwelling of the city's patron goddess, a treasury, and a symbol of Athenian power and cultural supremacy. The frieze, the metopies, and the pedimental sculptures depicted myths and historical events, reinforcing Athenian identity, their triumphs, and their divine favor. The celebrated Parthenon frieze, a continuous band of sculpture that wrapped around the Sala, depicted the Panathenaic procession, a grand festival honoring Athena. Imagine the vibrant colors that would have once adorned these sculptures and architectural elements, bringing the marble to life, a stark contrast to the stark white ruins we see today. The Parthenon was a living, breathing testament to Athenian democracy, a physical manifestation of their collective ideals, their pursuit of excellence, and their belief in the power of reason and beauty to elevate human experience. To walk around the Parthenon, even in an imagination, is to feel the weight of centuries of human aspiration. The precise cutting and fitting of each marble block, the almost invisible joints, the sheer scale of the undertaking, all speak of a society that valued public works, that invested immensely in the civic and sacred realm. The Parthenon's enduring presence on the Acropolis is not just a reminder of a magnificent past, but a continuous whisper of the enduring power of design, of the meticulous thought and profound artistry that can transform inert stone into a living, breathing testament to human genius. It taught the world that architecture could be more than shelter. It could be a philosophical statement, a work of art, and a profound expression of a civilization's deepest ideals. Its secrets, subtly hidden in its curves and inclinations, continue to teach us about the very nature of perception and the timeless quest for perfection. Beyond the sanctuary, the rise of public spaces and theaters. Imagine the hum of voices, the scent of olive oil, and freshly baked bread mingling in the air, the rhythmic sound of sandals on stone. We are no longer solely focused on the dwelling places of gods, but on the places where humans converged, where democracy was practiced, where bodies were trained, and where stories were told under the vast expanse of the Grecian sky. The ancient Greeks, true to their civic-minded spirit, extended their architectural ingenuity beyond the confines of the temple, creating public spaces that fostered community, intellectual discourse, and the flourishing of their unique culture. This expansion of architectural purpose, while seemingly less overtly tied to the golden ratio secret, nonetheless reflects the same underlying principles of order, functionality, and aesthetic harmony that characterized their temples. The Greeks sought to create spaces that were not just utilitarian, but uplifting, beautiful, and conducive to their civic ideals. One of the most vital of these public spaces was the Agora. Imagine stepping into this bustling marketplace and civic center, the very heart of the Greek city-state. It was not merely a place for commerce. It was the nexus of public life. Picture a large, open square, perhaps irregular in shape, but defined and enhanced by the structures that bordered it. Here, citizens gathered to discuss politics, engage in philosophical debates, conduct business, and participate in judicial proceedings. The Agora was a dynamic, fluid space, constantly adapting to the rhythms of daily life. While the earliest agoras were often less formally planned, they quickly evolved to incorporate specific architectural elements designed to facilitate their varied functions. Foremost among these were the stoas. Imagine long, colonnaded walkways, open on one side, offering shelter from the scorching sun or sudden rains. These were not simply covered passages. They were versatile architectural elements that framed the agora, defining its edges and providing functional spaces for a multitude of activities. Picture merchants setting up stalls beneath their shade, philosophers pacing thoughtfully as they engaged in discourse, or citizens simply gathering to socialize and exchange news. The stoa, typically built in the Doric or Ionic style, extended the architectural language of the temple into the civic realm, bringing elements of order and beauty to everyday interactions. The Stoa Poikile in Athens, for example, was famous for its murals depicting historical battles, serving as both a public art gallery and a gathering place for philosophical schools, most notably the Stoics, who took their name from it. The gentle repetition of columns along a stoa created a sense of rhythm and calm, even amidst the bustle, and measured cadence that echoed the visual harmony found in their temples. They provided a sense of enclosure and definition to the open space of the agora, creating a series of visual rooms without walls, fostering interaction and community. Beyond the agora, the Greeks designed specialized structures for education and physical training. Imagine the sound of young men's voices, the thud of wrestling bodies, the scent of dust and sweat. These were the gymnasiums and palaestras. The gymnasium was a larger complex, often encompassing outdoor running tracks, open exercise areas, and indoor spaces for bathing and lectures. The palaestra, often a part of a larger gymnasium or a standalone facility, was specifically designed for wrestling and other combat sports, typically featuring an open courtyard surrounded by colonnaded rooms. These architectural forms were utilitarian, but they also embodied the Greek ideal of kalokatathia, the harmonious development of both mind and body. The simplicity of their design, often centered around open courtyards and covered walkways, encouraged movement, reflection, and social interaction. They were not ornate, but their functional layout and the use of familiar architectural elements, like columns, created spaces that felt ordered and conducive to their purpose, reflecting the innate Greek desire for balance and clarity in all aspects of life. However, perhaps no other public structure speaks to the Greek spirit of communal gathering and intellectual pursuit more profoundly than the theater. Imagine the gentle slope of a hillside, carved by human hands into concentric rows of stone seating, facing a natural performance area. The Greek theater was not merely a place of entertainment. It was a sacred space, a civic forum, and a crucible for dramatic art that explored the deepest questions of human existence, destiny, and morality. The very design of the theater was an architectural marvel, ingeniously utilizing natural topography to achieve unparalleled acoustics. Picture the iconic theater of Dionysus on the southern slope of the Athenian Acropolis. Feel the smooth, cool stone beneath you as you sit on one of the tiered benches. The koilon, the seating area, typically curved in a semicircle, embraced the orchestra. The circular performing area at the bottom. The natural incline of the hillside provided perfect sightlines for thousands of spectators, and the precise geometry of the curving rows ensured that every word spoken on the stage would carry clearly to the topmost seats. Imagine the actors, their voices projected effortlessly across the vast space, amplified by the natural acoustics. This was achieved not through complex sound engineering, but through the thoughtful shaping of the space, a testament to the Greeks' intuitive understanding of form and function. Behind the orchestra stood the skene, a building that served as a backdrop for the plays, a changing room for actors, and often represented the facade of a palace or temple in the dramatic narrative. Over time, the skene evolved, becoming more elaborate, providing a permanent architectural backdrop for the unfolding dramas. The integration of the natural landscape with sophisticated architectural planning in the theater highlights the Greek ability to create monumental structures that felt harmonious with their environment, rather than imposed upon it. The open-air nature of the Greek theater, exposed to the elements, connected the human drama unfolding on stage with the vastness of the sky and the surrounding landscape, imbuing the experience with a profound, almost spiritual dimension. These public spaces, the agoras, stoas, gymnasiums, and theaters collectively demonstrate that Greek architecture was not solely about monumental religious structures. It was a holistic art form that shaped the very rhythms of public life. The principles of order, proportion, and visual harmony that guided the construction of their temples were subtly, yet consistently, applied to these civic buildings. The repeated rhythm of columns in a stoa, the precisely curved seating of a theater, the clear, functional layouts of gymnasiums, all reflect an underlying desire for clarity, balance, and an aesthetically pleasing environment conducive to human flourishing. They were built to last, to foster community, and to elevate the everyday experience. In these spaces, the golden ratio's secret was not just about precise measurements. It was about the intuitive understanding that well-proportioned, harmonious environments could uplift the human spirit, encourage rational thought, and strengthen the bonds of citizenship. The legacy of these civic spaces continues to inspire urban planning and public architecture even today, reminding us of the enduring power of design to shape and enrich human interaction. Hellenistic horizon, spreading Greek style across ancient civilizations, the dust settling on battlefields across continents, from the Aegean to the Indus River, and the roar of Alexander the Great's armies receding into legend. In his wake, a new era dawned, the Hellenistic period, a time of immense cultural exchange and unprecedented urban expansion. No longer confined to the heartland of Greece, the principles of Greek architecture, imbued with their deep understanding of proportion, balance, and visual harmony, the unspoken essence of the golden ratio's appeal, began to journey with the conquerors, the settlers, the merchants, and the philosophers. As Greek ideas spread, so too did Greek forms, transforming distant landscapes with their distinctive elegance. Picture newly founded cities rising from the desert sands or alongside ancient rivers, meticulously planned with straight streets intersecting at right angles, a clear departure from the organic growth of older settlements. This rectilinear grid plan, a hallmark of Greek urbanism, allowed for efficient organization and clear demarcation of public and private spaces. Imagine walking along broad avenues, lined with trees and colonnades, designed not just for practicality, but for grand effect. This systematic approach to city planning, often attributed to Hippodamus of Miletus in the classical period, found its fullest expression in the Hellenistic world, as new metropolises like Alexandria in Egypt, Antioch in Syria, and Pergamon in Asia Minor were conceived and built from the ground up on monumental scales. These cities were testaments to the Hellenistic rulers' desire to project power, prestige, and cultural sophistication. Within these new urban centers, Greek architectural styles adapted and evolved. while the Doric order continued its dignified presence, often utilized for market halls or military structures. It was the more ornate Ionic and the increasingly popular Corinthian orders that truly flourished in this era of expanded empires and grander ambitions. Imagine the Ionic volutes becoming more elaborate, the columns themselves growing taller and more slender, aspiring to greater elegance. And the Corinthian order, with its lush acanthus leaves, found its true moment in the sun during the Hellenistic period, becoming the favored style for monumental structures that sought to impress with their intricate beauty and rich detail. It was as if the austere purity of earlier times gave way to a desire for greater visual splendor, reflecting the wealth and cosmopolitan nature of the new Hellenistic kingdoms. While the strict mathematical ratios might have become more varied in their application, the underlying aesthetic principles of appealing proportion and harmonious arrangement, those unspoken secrets of the golden ratio, continued to guide the hands of Hellenistic architects. The goal remained to create buildings that were not just functional, but profoundly beautiful and emotionally resonant. Consider the city of Alexandria, founded by Alexander himself in Egypt, which quickly became the intellectual and cultural capital of the Hellenistic world. Imagine its magnificent harbor, dominated by the legendary lighthouse of Pharos, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. While its exact appearance is lost to time, ancient descriptions paint a picture of a towering, multi-storied structure, perhaps incorporating tiered sections that might have echoed Greek architectural principles of stacked forms and diminishing proportions. It was a marvel of engineering and a beacon of Hellenistic power, guiding ships to one of the world's busiest ports. Envision, too, the great library of Alexandria, a sprawling complex that housed an unparalleled collection of scrolls, its quiet courtyards and colonnaded halls fostering centuries of scholarship. Though its architecture was likely less monumental than a temple, its design would have prioritized functionality, light, and a sense of ordered space, characteristic of Greek rationalism applied to intellectual pursuits. Journey east to Pergamon in Asia Minor, a thriving kingdom that sought to rival Athens in its cultural achievements. Imagine ascending the steep Acropolis, discovering a city meticulously planned to exploit the dramatic topography. The most celebrated structure here was the Great Altar of Pergamon, dedicated to Zeus, a monumental U-shaped structure famed for its colossal and deeply dramatic frieze depicting the Gigantomachy, the battle between the Olympian gods and the giants. Imagine the powerful, swirling figures carved in high relief, their musculature exaggerated, their expressions intense. This was Hellenistic art at its most theatrical, a Baroque classicism that pushed the boundaries of emotional expression, yet still within a framework of classical forms. The altar's architecture, while grand and ornate, maintained the underlying Greek principles of proportion and sculptural integration. The Library of Pergamon, second only to Alexandria's, was another testament to the city's intellectual ambitions. Designed with similar colonnaded courtyards and reading rooms, demonstrating the continued spread of functional Greek architectural typologies. Even further east, Greek influence permeated regions previously untouched by Hellenic culture. In places like Ai Khanum in Afghanistan, a Greco-Bactrian city, imagine discovering the ruins of a gymnasium, a theater, and houses built with courtyards and peristyles, clearly demonstrating the deep embedding of Greek urban and domestic architectural forms in Central Asia. The local materials and craftsmanship might have given these structures a unique character, but the underlying design principles were distinctly Greek. Perhaps one of the most fascinating examples of this cultural fusion is found in the Gandhara region, where Greek artistic and architectural influences merged with Buddhist traditions. Imagine statues of the Buddha, draped in robes that echo classical Greek drapery, their faces perhaps with idealized Greek features. Architectural elements like Corinthian columns and pilasters were incorporated into Buddhist stupas and monastic complexes. Picture a stupa, the traditional Buddhist reliquary mound, adorned with classical architectural motifs, its base sometimes featuring friezes depicting Buddhist narratives, alongside figures reminiscent of Greek gods or heroes. This blending of forms, though far from the Greek homeland, speaks volumes about the universality of the aesthetic appeal found in Greek architectural orders and their adaptability to new religious and cultural contexts. The elegant proportions and balanced forms, even if reinterpreted, clearly resonated across diverse civilizations. The patronage of architecture also shifted dramatically in the Hellenistic period. No longer primarily driven by democratic city-states or religious cults, much of the grandest architecture was now commissioned by powerful Hellenistic kings and queens. Imagine these monarchs, eager to legitimize their rule and display their wealth and sophistication, funding massive building projects, new palaces, grand civic centers, monumental tombs, and vast public works. Architecture became a potent tool for royal propaganda, a visual language to express imperial might and cultural supremacy. The scale often increased, the ornamentation grew richer, and the desire for dramatic effect became more pronounced. Yet, even in this pursuit of grandeur, the underlying grammar of Greek architectural orders, with their inherent sense of balance and clarity, provided the framework. The very secret of the golden ratio, not as a rigid rule, but as an inherent desire for proportion that feels innately right, allowed these diverse builders to create structures that were both impressive and aesthetically pleasing. As you drift now, consider the profound and enduring nature of this Hellenistic diffusion. It was a period when the very essence of Greek architectural genius was distilled and dispersed, taking root in new soils and flourishing in unexpected ways. These structures, whether a lighthouse in Egypt, an altar in Turkey, or a stupa in ancient Gandhara, all carried within them the undeniable imprint of Greek design principles. They laid the groundwork for future empires, particularly the Romans, who would eagerly adopt and adapt these Hellenistic innovations, further cementing the timeless relevance of Greek architectural forms and ideals. The quiet whispers of balance, the subtle curve of a column, the logical flow of a planned city, these were the enduring lessons that continued to shape the world long after Alexander's empire had fractured. The undying legacy, how Greek architecture lives on. The passage of time not as a vanishing act, but as a gentle sedimentation, where layers of culture build upon one another, yet the earliest foundations remain, silently supporting all that follows. The architectural language developed by the ancient Greeks, with its profound understanding of proportion, balance, and the almost mystical appeal of the golden ratio spirit, did not vanish with the decline of their direct political power. Instead, it became a foundational grammar, a timeless vocabulary adapted, and celebrated by successive civilizations, ensuring that the Greek aesthetic would live on, shaping the very spaces we inhabit even today. Our first, and perhaps most significant, inheritors of Greek architectural genius were the Romans. Imagine the mighty Roman Empire, vast and pragmatic, conquering territories, but also absorbing cultures. The Romans greatly admired Greek art and architecture, but they were also brilliant innovators. They adopted the Greek architectural orders, Doric, Ionic, and especially the more ornate Corinthian, with immense enthusiasm. Picture grand Roman temples, like the Mycenae in France, which could almost be mistaken for a Greek temple, with its peripteral colonnade and Corinthian capitals. Yet the Romans often used these orders in new ways. While the Greeks saw columns primarily as structural supports, the Romans frequently employed them decoratively, as engaged columns or pilasters attached to walls, hinting at structure rather than bearing primary loads. This allowed them to express their own innovations, such as the grand arch and the magnificent concrete dome. Imagine the Parthenon in Rome, a colossal concrete dome, unprecedented in scale, but fronted by a traditional Corinthian portico, a clear homage to Greek temple facades. The Romans took the Greek language of form and infused it with their own engineering prowess and love of monumental interiors, creating a powerful synthesis that spread across their vast empire, further disseminating Greek principles in new contexts. The secret of the golden ratio, in its broadest sense of harmonious proportion, continued to guide their architects, even as they pushed the boundaries of materials and structural forms. Then, centuries passed, and Europe entered a period where the classical forms lay dormant, buried under the weight of medieval styles. But with the dawn of the Renaissance in 15th century Italy, imagine a profound intellectual and artistic awakening, a fervent rediscovery of classical antiquity. Architects like Filippo Brunelleschi, Leon Battista Alberti, and Andrea Palladio meticulously studied the ruins of ancient Rome and pored over texts like Vitruvius's De Architectura, the only surviving architectural treatise from antiquity which described the Greek orders and principles. They saw in Greek and Roman architecture a clarity, a rationality, and a harmonious beauty that resonated with their renewed interest in humanism and classical ideals. Picture architects drawing precise measurements from ancient ruins, carefully analyzing the relationships between parts. The Renaissance saw the systematic reintroduction of the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders as the fundamental building blocks of architectural design. Buildings like Palladio's villas, with their perfectly symmetrical facades and grand porticos, or the early Renaissance churches, with their elegant proportions and classical details, speak directly to this revival. They were not simply copying. They were interpreting and reimagining Greek principles for a new age, proving the enduring adaptability of these classical forms. The golden ratio's secret was reborn, consciously or intuitively, as architects sought ideal proportions to create spaces that felt balanced, uplifting, and timeless. As the centuries progressed, the influence only deepened. The 18th and early 19th centuries witnessed the powerful wave of neoclassicism, a movement that explicitly sought to return to the perceived purity and rationalism of ancient Greek and Roman art, often favoring the perceived austerity of Greek forms over the perceived excesses of Roman Baroque. Imagine a world yearning for civic virtue, for the ideals of democracy and enlightenment. Architects and patrons looked to Athens as a model. Buildings in this style often featured stark, unadorned Doric columns, grand porticos, and severe geometric forms, evoking a sense of solemnity and civic importance. Think of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, a monumental Doric triumphal arch, or the majestic facade of the British Museum in London, a grand Ionic temple front. In the burgeoning United States, the newly formed republic consciously adopted Greek architectural forms for its public buildings, seeing them as symbols of democratic ideals and republican virtues. Imagine the U.S. Capitol building, with its classical dome and Corinthian columns, or countless state capitals, courthouses, and banks across America, all echoing the temples and stoas of ancient Greece. This was a deliberate choice, a visual declaration that the spirit of Athenian democracy and its architectural language would define the aspirations of a new nation. And even today, the undying legacy of Greek architecture continues to permeate our built environment, often in subtle, almost unconscious ways. While contemporary architecture embraces new materials, technologies, and forms, the fundamental principles of clarity, proportion, and the thoughtful organization of space, the very essence of that elusive golden ratio secret, remain deeply ingrained. From the minimalist aesthetic of modern design, which often celebrates simple forms and balanced compositions, to the enduring appeal of classical elements in corporate headquarters or university campuses, the spirit of Greek architecture is omnipresent. The idea of a column as a dignified support, the beauty of a well-proportioned doorway, the harmonious relationship between a building and its site, the power of a clear and logical plan. These are all lessons whispered across millennia from the sun-baked stones of ancient Greece. The golden ratio secret, in its truest sense, isn't just a mathematical formula. It's a profound human yearning for order amidst chaos, for beauty and simplicity, for harmony in design. The ancient Greeks, through their relentless pursuit of perfection in stone, laid bare this secret, embedding it within their temples, their public spaces, and their very urban fabric. Their architectural achievements are not just static ruins. They are living testaments to an enduring quest, silent teachers that continue to shape our understanding of beauty, function, and the timeless art of building. As you drift into repose, know that the magnificent structures of ancient Greece, in their elegant proportions and enduring forms, continue to shape our world, whispering tales of logic and beauty across the ages.